One, two.
Girl, what up, girl?
What up? What up?
How you doing? How you doing?
Raising my hands up, raising my hands up. Oh.
Welcome to the Video and Vinyl Club. I'm Emmy Wildwood. I am a musician, a producer, an artist, an art director, and this is my gorgeous co-host.
Thank you, other gorgeous co-hosts. My name is Erin Mars. I am a writer, director, actor, musician,
Party
jack of all
animal.
trades, party animal, failed dog trainer.
Member of the Bad Girls Club.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
There's two exclusive members.
Yeah, there you go. We had a great time last week seeing a really special showing of A Complete Unknown, which is the new Bob Dylan biopic. And that's the film we're going to be talking about today. And Emmy and I were really lucky. In the area where I live, there's this wonderful, wonderful theater that you can become a member of. The tickets are very affordable. And I think almost every week or at least once a month, they'll show a film and they'll have a speaker, who is usually a professor from Princeton University, talk about in depth something that has to do with the film. So for this film, they had
Sean Mullins. He's a professor at Princeton, and it was really special to go see this talk and see him talk about it. And I would definitely go do this again with you. I felt like it was super interesting. Basically, he briefed us before the movie started. He sat in front of the movie theater, which was totally sold out, by the way, to see this talk and this film. He sat in front and briefed us on the book he wrote called Bob Dylan in America, which is like a unique look at Dylan's place in American cultural history. And he basically got unprecedented access to Dylan's studio tapes, his recording notes, super rare photographs, all kinds of stuff. And the professor was like a super big fan his whole life since he was a teenager, growing up in Greenwich Village. So half a century later, he revisits Dylan's work with the skills of an eminent American historian, as well as the passion of a fan. And what was cool about it was, I think it was really interesting to know that in the beginning of the talk, he said that all of the events that happened in this film actually happened. They weren't made up events, but that none of them happened in the order in which the movie lays out. This movie is actually based on a sort of reimagination of Dylan's life that was put out in like the early 2000s.
Yeah, kind of loosely based on the book that was released in 2015 called Dylan Goes Electric by Elijah Wald. Mm-hmm.
Dylan Goes Electric. Something I planned on remembering and mentioning on the podcast is that he said that it doesn't really matter that the timeline isn't perfect because history gets mixed up. It gets remembered differently. What matters is the spirit. The spirit of history was in it, the spirit of the time, the spirit of the relationships, and so forth. So, Erin, why don't you tell us a little bit about the movie?
So 4 things actually that professor talked about for us to look for in the movie was Pete Seeger driving Dylan to his house, the TV show that Pete Seeger had, Pete Seeger was an American singer-songwriter who had a real TV show called Rainbow Quest, and he would bring on these different stars. There's a scene also in the Viking Motel, and then Bob Dylan and Woody Guthrie in the last scene. Anyway, so let's talk about the synopsis of this film. So we start with Dylan around 19 years old. It's 1961. He's come to New York City and he's looking for Woody Guthrie, who he completely idealizes and looks up to. Woody Guthrie is another incredible American singer-songwriter. What had happened to the folk music movement, just as context, so there's a little bit more understanding. Folk music in the United States had really started to pick up. What people were saying with it was about like equality, equal rights, workers' rights. It had some level of like socialism undertones, or at least that was the perception. So when 1950 rolled around and there was the Red Scare, the trials that were happening in Washington, D.C., McCarthy was blacklisting people. And so the folk music kind of hit this hard stop because a lot of the people associated with folk music were also being accused of being communists. And there
Right.
was this huge scare about that. And one of those people who had to go in front of Congress and argue about one of his songs was Pete Seeger. So in the film, when Dylan comes to New York, he's in this bar. He's like, where am I going to find Woody Guthrie? And he sees on the newspaper, Woody Guthrie is in a hospital. He's not well. He's very, very sick. He's been in a hospital. Dylan asks this random guy, how do I get there? He's like, that's not here. It's in New Jersey, dude. You got to like go back from where you came as far as where he had driven. He's like, okay. So he gets out to this hospital. He comes in and he meets Guthrie, who's sitting there, and Pete Seeger, who's one of his best friends, is sitting next to him and kind of just catching him up on what had just recently happened when he was in Washington, D.C., dealing with this legislation that had come through. So they're like, "Oh, hi, who are you?" And he goes, "I'm Bob Dylan." They're like, "Okay." And he says, I have this song I wrote for Woody. I want to play it for him. He plays this song, and it's immediately apparent to these two guys who had been at the forefront of the folk music scene in the United States that this person, is amazingly talented. He's young, and this can be part of the rejuvenation of the folk music scene. Seeger takes him under his wing, brings him to his house, gives him a place to stay. Let's fast forward. A lot happens in somebody's life, and this is like a 2-hour movie, or a 140-minute movie.
And they're saying that this movie really focuses on the relationship between Bob Dylan and Pete Seeger mostly. And so you're skipping through maybe not every event of his life, but the sort of pinnacle moments of their specific relationship.
Yes.
Pete Seeger was like a family loved folk artist. He went from being super edgy to being really wholesome.
Yeah.
And
Almost like the Mr. Rogers of the scene.
of folk scene. And that this was a time activists had gone from being sort of like modern and really liberal to kind of taking it back to the like people's movement. And that's really what, between the Red Scare and the government wasn't crazy about how, that had happened. And I think Pete Seeger got a little freaked out by it, and he sort of went to a more wholesome and safe side. And right around this time, he's meeting Bob Dylan.
Right, exactly. So we see their relationship. Pete really brings Dylan into the scene. He starts bringing him to the clubs that are happening with the folk stuff, getting him up on stage. We see him meet Joan Baez at an open mic where there's like industry executives and a manager who later goes on to manage Dylan, who's Albert Grossman. We see a little bit of chemistry at that point between Joan Baez and Dylan. And we see that, when this manager is talking to Joan Baez and he's like, why don't you sign with this big label? They have all the top stars. They just really need somebody who's their folk person. And she's like, no, I'm like a folk purist. I don't want to do that. I don't want anybody to change how I am. Well, later Dylan does take that deal. He'll do it. And so the first record that he puts out under this deal is covers of other people's songs. And it doesn't really do well. And he feels a little bit let down. At that point, he has a girlfriend, Sylvie Russo. She's loosely based on a girlfriend that he had in his real life, who is an artist who he wasn't really the best to. We see some cheating happening, and we see a lot of, the implication of some womanizing and stuff. The film really, though, starts to hit speed as we very quickly see his career start to take off, but also him becoming a little bit bored with just playing an acoustic guitar. He wants to play with a band. He sees Johnny Cash, who he becomes pen pals with. He's playing with a full band. He's seeing other people do full band stuff, and that's what he wants to do. But the people who are really tied tightly to the folk music scene, don't want that to happen because that would kind of contradict what they've worked so hard to build. And he would be the antithesis of, they've made him basically the prince of the folk revival movement. For him to go electric would completely, ruin in their own minds what they've tried so hard to build. But ultimately, that is what he does. And it was really cool to kind of see that. Let's like, are you a big Dylan fan? Are you somebody who kind of like grew up listening to Bob Dylan and
My dad, who taught me to play guitar at 9 years old, who is still in a dad band to this day, plays 3 times a month. They practice twice a week, and he's 76 years old. Not for any other reason besides the fact that he was an obsessed fan. My dad was also a hippie. He was a writer. He went to school for creative writing and literature. And there were moments in my life where I remember this one time, like a Dylan box set came out, like of all his records put together, probably in like the early no, maybe the 90s. Like I was young. And he just fell in love with him all over again. And I remember this one night he called me into the living room and like sat me down like he was about to give a lecture and like read me all these Bob Dylan lyrics and then like made me give him feedback on what I thought they were about. And let me tell you, that was like very common occurrence in my household. Like
Mhm.
I can't really listen to music without reflecting on what the lyrics mean, what they say, and all of this. And so I learned to do that on Bob Dylan lyrics. So I knew Dylan was a great writer, and I knew Dylan was a poet, and I knew that he sang kind of funny. And I think that between it being forced on me and his quirky voice, like I don't know
Mhm.
if it was my favorite thing in the whole world, but watching this movie made me feel like I really did like Dylan. I think being older too now, like I can appreciate some of the stories he was telling and some of the poetry. It's a little
Mm.
it reminds me of a lot of writers from honestly from the 50s, like novelists and stuff, where the sentences were short and powerful and they packed a lot of punch. I mean, there's less is more in a lot of ways with what he's actually saying. Like a lot is implied, in a time where you couldn't
Mhm.
like really outright say controversial stuff. He has protested in his songs in like utter poetry, cover up
Mhm.
magnificence. And
Mhm.
so no, I was not a big fan of Dylan, but I knew Dylan like I had studied it in school or something like
Wow. Yeah,
that.
no, that's great.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I have had a lot of friends who love Dylan. One friend in particular really loves Dylan. I never got into it. I never picked it up. I think it was maybe just a thing of exposure. I don't know. Maybe it was his voice I didn't really love. That was something in the film, I have to say. I thought Timothée Chalamet did a really great job singing a lot of these songs, and I had a different appreciation for them. Um,
Yeah, he was amazing. You should tell them about the actors who played everybody.
yes. So this film stars Timothée Chalamet as Bob Dylan. Edward Norton plays Pete Seeger, and he did a phenomenal job. Also,
Awesome.
there was moments he's on film. They must have given him something with his teeth. Like he just looked not like there's moments you would look and that's not Ed Norton you're looking at, which I
No,
thought was amazing. He really, really got into that character. Elle Fanning, who I love always,
love.
she plays Sylvie Russo. She did a really nice job with that. It's kind of soft touch as a person. She was an artist. She had a nice way she played that character. Monica Barbaro played Joan Baez. Boyd Holbrook as Johnny Cash.
Mm.
Scoot McNairy played Woody Guthrie. I thought he also did an amazing job.
Food was
Um,
great.
and there's more and more and more. It was a big cast. But I feel like part of the reason why also this film is interesting right now is because of the political things that were happening then and a little bit of what we're seeing kind of happening now in some ways.
Mhm.
Just talking about people's rights, what people have rights for. And The 60s, we're talking about the civil rights movement is in full swing. We're talking about, following soon after the women's rights movement, is happening. The United States is still in a Cold War with Russia. That there was just all this change happening in the country, and people were upset. They didn't want to do this anymore. A, a lot of people, let's put it that way, there was this big shift. And I think music and culture, film and all these things really show some of that tension. You think about like films with James Dean, which were coming out around that time,
Mhm.
and young angsty teenagers being like, I don't want to do this. They don't want to be in this moment of like total conformity. They want to build their own lives. The 60s, there's a lot of drug culture that starts to come into play. The music is coming over with the British invasion. The Beatles are here. We've got all these things happening. It's groovy, baby. And it starts to go into this world where people have more opportunities to explore different things.
You're right. People were upset. And if there's one thing that always happens is that people start using the arts to, well, soothe themselves, soothe, you know, the entire country, if not the world. And so it really does make sense because like people had anxiety, people had like aggressive anxiety. They were scared of like getting bombed. They wanted to soothe themselves. And so it makes sense that folk music was sort of born. It's a little bit more relaxing, and it's about peace and love, and like people needed that. And not only is it soothing, it's like a way for us to process our feelings. And so artists at that time were helping the entire country process what had just happened to them, which is our job as artists. We're supposed to hold
Sure.
up a mirror
Yeah.
to the world and be like, this happened, and some people can't take it. And, this is a whole nother conversation, but that's my opinion on why certain people can take certain kinds of music and some people can't. They need whatever it is in whatever genre or whatever style, they need that to help process their feelings. And sometimes they're not ready for that. And so, it's kind of like that folk music was the medicine of the time.
Yeah. And a rejuvenation to the idealism of like when things were easier, when things were
Yeah.
simpler, which I think is a little bit, kind of not
Naive.
100% true, right? But it's
Yeah.
like, if we're out in the Rocky Mountains and I've got my banjo, and Pete Seeger was an
Mm-hmm.
amazing banjo player. So it's like he's playing banjo, and, all these guys are incredible musicians. The way that style of music came from places of strife, came from
Mm-hmm.
places of hardship. And I think that that's one of the things that struck me about this film is we're having this moment, and I was curious when we were in the talk if someone would ask this professor this, that could this happen again where we have a lot of songs come up and people are getting really lit up with them. Does that make sense? Like it back
Absolutely.
into
Like,
like the heart of like change. Like we're scared. Totalitarianism fears. There's fears about our rights being taken away. We have books being banned in libraries, which I think are terrifying. People are talking about taking away funding for libraries in across the United States and certain places, especially they're more on board with that. There's just all of these things that I feel like are, you could say fear-based, but I think not necessarily coming out of nowhere. I mean, this is stuff that we're all, I think, generally have different collective fears about. And so we're back in this moment in our own time where we're not sure what's happening. Change is happening. Does the administration understand the people? I don't know, right?
right.
And that was part of the thing that was happening when Kennedy was president. The civil rights movement had like just started, but it didn't really take off until he was unfortunately assassinated and then Johnson came into office. And that's when you got more bolstering because he was somebody who was really all about it. Like, let's go. I'm going to make these things happen. We're getting rid of these segregated laws. We're getting rid of these different things. Let's push forward. Which was something I kind of learned at the Civil Rights Museum when I went there. And I recommend anybody who has some time and wants to go to definitely check that out. You can see a lot of great stuff. Regardless, Bob Dylan in the beginning of his career was really in that spot.
Well, you asked that question. Could it happen again? Absolutely. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
These are the moments where it does happen again. So, like earlier, I said it's our job as artists to hold up a mirror to America.
Mm-hmm.
And when totalitarianism begins, what happens is they want to stop communication among the masses, right?
Mm-hmm.
So communities get tighter, scenes develop,
Mm-hmm.
underground clubs happen, and
Mm-hmm.
people start influencing each other. That we saw that with grunge music. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
People start influencing each other. I mean, grunge music was an absolute backlash to the 80s uptight Bush era and Reaganism and all that stuff. So it's like we are absolutely, it could happen again. It has happened again since then, and it's going to keep happening. And
Yeah.
this is our time, I think, as artists and musicians to develop community and respond that way. And I
Yeah.
think some great art will come out of it.
See, I'm not sure. And it's not that I don't think that artists will create those type of works. I agree with you. I think people will, and I think they're going to be inspired to do that. But with the decentralization of media and with having so few companies control such a large piece of the media and a few people deciding what gets played and what doesn't play and having artist after artist come out of like the Disney, junk machine, so to speak, and then they're everywhere and their songs are everywhere. Are we only going to continue to hear and really be exposed, and I'm talking like on a mass level, to just that machine produced stuff? And I'm not trying to like call out some of these artists as not being high quality, but they're not, it's
They're
very
AI
different.
artists. They're AI artists.
Yeah, it's very,
AI is writing their melodies. AI is writing their whole
yeah.
personas, and I think there's going to be a backlash to that. I really do. I think it's pissing people off, especially artists. I think it's really pissing people off.
Well, I find it feels boring.
Yeah,
It feels very
mathematical.
mathematical. It doesn't feel genuine. And I
Mhm.
think right now, people want a more genuine, real experience
Bingo.
more than they've had in a long time. And my feeling, and I'm hoping maybe this will be true, we're going to have more people have the opportunities to present and share a more genuine form of their own artistry. And I'm not saying it's got to be folk music with like an acoustic guitar. I'm saying any type of songs in any type of genre that has to do with almost like Rage Against the Machine style stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
stuff that's just about like, hey, everybody, do you see what's happening? Like,
yeah.
wake up. And I feel that is probably going to be coming. That would be my prediction.
I'd love us to give a platform to indie artists who are doing that. So if you're listening, please send us your links and your demos to videoandvinylclub@gmail.com,
Hmm.
and we will listen to your music and your band and your record. And maybe we'll start a once a month indie artist co-hosting experience.
Yeah, we'll have you on as a guest. We'll chat with you.
To be fair, me and Aaron have talked about that already, but it seemed like a good moment to bring it up.
It is a good moment to bring it up. It
Yeah.
definitely is. One of the things that they did very well, I think they showed how surprising and how quickly he became famous and how
Mm.
almost that was really hard for him.
Oh, yeah.
He's young. He was young when that happened. And he walks in and it's like, that's Bob Dylan. And people go crazy and he can't go anywhere. It's like the freedom that I think we all take for granted with our own anonymity. You, when you lose that and it's unexpectedly fast, I think it's kind of whiplash, especially when you're young and you haven't had that opportunity to really establish your own knowledge of self. Like, who
Yeah,
are you? And
yeah.
that's also part of, Bob Dylan's whole thing. He is somebody who you ask him about his life and he's never really going to give you a straight answer. It's like he's going to tell you a million different fables and he's just kind of making it up as he's going along. And people are like, who is this guy to a degree, right?
Mhm.
Yet he's an incredible storyteller. And it seems like he never was able to, to turn that off, at least, even with the people who were the most intimately close to him.
I thought it was pretty funny how they how did they describe him? Not a wordsmith, but a like a clown. You said, remember I looked at you and I
Yeah.
said, what did they call him? Do you remember what it was?
Fabulist.
A fableist.
He was the greatest fabulist of them all when it came to his own life.
Oh, yeah, so it was like uh
That's what the professor
yeah,
was
oh,
talking
and
about.
the professor said he was really funny. And there's a lot of times in this movie where Dylan, it shows Dylan's personality as being like dry and rude, and people see him a lot as an asshole. But there's
Yeah.
also been some discussion about whether or not he had some sort of neurodivergent tendencies
Hmm.
because his social cues could be a little harsh and um
Yes.
missed the mark a bit. And
Hmm.
I think that's interesting. Like back in the day, we would all think of this guy as a real asshole, and now
Yeah.
it's really we would meet someone and have a reason to understand them as neurodivergent.
That actually, hold on, that actually reminded me of this video clip of Bob Dylan. You know what all the famous people singing that song, like, heal the world, feed the people, dun dun dun, to make a better place. That's
Oh
just
yeah,
leaving.
yes,
And
yes,
Bob Dylan's in the middle of the crowd, and he's just
yes.
like barely moving his mouth. He's like,
He doesn't give a shit. It's
yeah,
like,
he's
where
just
am
like,
I?
what am I doing here? Yeah, and
Yeah,
they're like, we are the world.
yeah.
It's so funny when you look at it because
You
then you frame it and you're like, maybe the guy, he's not trying to be a dick. He's having a moment of like, his brain is not
overwhelm,
working. Yeah, he's
overwhelm.
like
Yeah.
completely overwhelmed, like,
Overstimulation.
yeah, yeah,
Um, yeah, and so we see a little bit more of that, and maybe that he's a super internal guy again, like a lot of artists are. We can be like introverted extroverts, and we really sort of prefer to be alone, even though we're great in front of audiences. We are energized by being alone. So we see a little bit of that. The professor generously called him a womanizer. I would say he was just probably famous and powerful and a great songwriter and had access to a lot of women. And so that paired with his dryness or neurodivergence kind of resulted in
yes,
him maybe not taking the greatest care with the women
yeah,
in his lives' feelings. I
yeah,
thought the relationship with him and Joan Baez was quite interesting. They were like lovers. I don't love
hmm,
using that word, but that's really what they were. They didn't have like a relationship based in like mutual like tenderness. It was more about like lust and passion and
yeah,
respect for each other's work.
yeah.
Yeah, so I thought that was an interesting aspect. And you looked at me afterwards and you said that actress
Had a beautiful voice.
had a beautiful voice, and she really did.
She did. She did an amazing job. That was Monica Barbaro.
Monica
Barbaro.
Barbaro.
She's an
Mhm.
American actress. She started with small roles, 2010s,
Yeah.
Chicago
Oh, and
PD.
we already said Timothee Chalamet was great, but he was like really great. He was very believable as Dylan, and I saw a clip of Dylan being like, he was amazing as me. It was an amazing film, and he was amazing as me. And he
Yeah.
sang these songs, and Aaron and I were saying like it made them really listenable. They became slightly more digestible in a way because he did it, and he really sang well. It was like I was a fan of Timothée Chalamet. I was like, have a
Yeah.
band, Tim.
Yeah. I thought he did a great job.
Yeah, and he's
Absolutely.
so really cute. I mean, I think this is Timothee Chalamet's best role so far that I've seen him act in.
I did just watch Dune, and he's pretty good in that too.
Oh yeah, Dune. Dune's dope. I've only seen Dune 1. I guess we could do Dune 1, Dune 2, and Dune 3 and
Yeah, I read the book, so I was like, I
Oh,
gotta.
you did?
I like to do that
Wow.
whenever there's a book movie correlation. I'm a nerd, dude. I
I,
gotta do it that
yeah, I
way.
know. I love it. I love that
And
you're
then
a
I
big
can be
nerd and
like,
I'm a big
That's
nerd.
not right. Blah blah blah. In the book they did this. In the book I imagined it like this.
you know,
That's the Instagram
yeah,
clip, biatch.
yeah.
Why did the book be like this? And then the film they did this.
I like to do that, except for those like sparkle vampires. I never read the books, and I don't think I saw really. Maybe I saw one movie.
Sparkle vampires?
Yeah,
You
what
mean
are they called?
Twilight?
Yeah, those ones.
By the way, earlier I did stop you because you were having a deep thought, but you said anonymity.
Anomaly.
It's
Yeah.
anonymity.
Look,
Tomato, tomato.
no, it's fine. My husband gives me stuff. He gives me crap all the time about when I say certain things. And I think it's because I'm from New England and he's just not used to the way
Maybe.
people are meant to talk, right? Like my parents were from Boston. I was born in Boston. I use certain phrases and words. Probably I don't even think about it. It's just how I say things.
Anonymity.
And when we're like at the grocery store, I'll be like, get a carriage. And he's like, what are you talking about? I'm like, right there, get a carriage.
Oh yeah, I
He's
like
like,
that.
a shopping cart.
That's cute. I think this movie, there's less human behavior to discuss here in the podcast today because while, it is a story of fame and you see like romance relationships occurring and sort of like betrayals and things like that. Really what this movie is about is the music. I mean, they play songs all the way through, like a great deal of them. That takes up time on the screen. This movie was long, but it feel like the story was really more about different sort of dynamics in him and Pete Seeger's relationship and the moment that Dylan decided to break out of folk and because it's literally based on the book Dylan Goes Electric and why that happened. So while we could go on and on talking about moments in the movie, it's really more about the music and watching a lot of music and hearing the songs and understanding the relationship between the songs and the time and the timeline of when all this came out and what was going on in his life. So
I'll be curious to see if any of those songs kind of have a rebirth in popularity with them being covers by these artists, these actors technically.
Oh, I'll link it on the playlist.
Okay, link it on the playlist. So totally selfishly, but like one of the people when we were at the theater, where Emmy and I were at the theater and we were giving this talk, different people were raising their hand and asking different questions. This one person said this question, and I thought it was like, wait, what? And this is just has to do with, New Jersey. Now, New Jersey has a real affinity for New Jersey musicians. And I'm talking like real hardcore level loyalty.
Oh, yeah.
You talk badly about someone like Bon Jovi, that's going to be a problem. But if you talk badly about Bruce Springsteen,
get out of here.
Get out of this state. Like, get out. Now, I'm like a new transplant here. And, I have no problem with Bruce. Do I know all of his songs? No. Have I seen him play live? Yeah, I've seen him play live. He does a good concert. He puts on a good show. One of the people, when they're asking these questions, they were talking about, the transitions in Bob Dylan's career. This person raises their hand. They're like, wow, I didn't know any other artists had transformations, like Bruce Springsteen. He's had transformations before. And I'm like, what? What transformations did Bruce Springsteen have? Because as far as I know, he started basically playing just himself with a guitar, and then he had a bar band, and he's still playing with that bar band.
Oh, yeah.
Am I missing something?
You're missing the New Jersey perspective, obsession and loyalty to.
I mean, because it's like, nothing bad against Bruce, but like he doesn't remind me of an artist that's like, wow, so transformative. Bruce Springsteen changed his vibe. How?
I think he had a more acoustic record first, but it was still dancey.
Yeah. But God forbid I say that out loud in a theater full of New Jersey people. They're going to turn on me and go, she's not from here. She's
They're-
not one of
They
us.
throw their popcorn at you.
Oh yeah, I'd be in big trouble.
So as the movie closed, Professor Willentz, Sean Willentz, stood up and yeah, he took questions like Aaron's saying. And I think what we mostly learned from him was that
We learned that Bob is in some ways a very private person who doesn't give all of the actual details of his own life, but that has been a true artist in the sense of creating and creating and creating. The guy's had a 60 plus year career, and
yeah,
a lot of people can't say that.
people want artists to please the crowd all the time. And there is a balance between like giving the people what they want and making them hear something new. And he was a trailblazer and really pushing the world forward. He was very responsible for so the way we think about things. He learned about it from the folk people, but he took it into a whole new genre and maybe in a way nobody had heard before. He also made poetry, rock and roll poetry. Seeing New York, and as a New Yorker, it was fun to see like the Village and see
This film was not filmed in New York.
they recreated it.
Guess where they filmed it? New
LA.
Jersey!
Did they really? Who directed this movie, by the way?
James Mangold. Mangold started the principal photography in August of 2023 in New York City and Montreal, but filming was postponed in July due to the SAG-AFTRA strike. And then they started, the schedule began in late March of 2024, was expected to occur throughout New Jersey, with scenes set in New York being filmed in Jersey City. And Norton said that during the 3 months of principal photography, Chalamet was relentless in staying immersed in the role as Dylan, not having contact with friends or visitors on set. Chalamet would often be referred to as Bob on set by Mangold and was listed as Bob Dylan on the set call sheet.
But you haven't at
Chalamet
all
went deep.
But you
Yeah.
haven't addressed the most important piece of the Timothee Chalamet timeline.
How he was able to keep his relationship with one of the Kardashians going while he was filming this film. Is that what you're saying?
When did he meet and fall in love with Kylie Jenner during the filming?
Yeah. Who knows? I don't know.
The whole time I was like, this guy's dating Kylie Jenner. The whole time I was like, this little nugget is dating Kylie Jenner. She's a lot of woman.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways.
Do we think Timothée Chalamet will be nominated for Best Actor for an Oscar for this film?
Probably.
Okay.
I don't know if he'll win.
Okay. What about Ed Norton for Best Supporting Actor?
Definitely nominated.
You think definitely nominated? Okay.
Yeah, I don't know if he'll win either.
Okay.
I mean, I think that it takes a lot of talent to recreate music and be convincing, and they both were. Whether or not the Academy will see it that way, I'm not sure. So we'll have to see.
Yeah, we'll just have to. I think that he'll definitely get nominated. I think that Ed Norton will get nominated. I think Monica Barbaro will get nominated. I don't think any of them will win, but I think they all will get nominated.
Yeah. What's your vinyl record rating, girl?
I'd give it a 7. It was,
Really?
it's a biopic. Yeah, it's fun. It's, it was interesting. I thought he did a good job, but I think it was a tough film to, they're focused on a timeline of like moving the life forward. And I didn't feel ever like a deeper connection to him after watching this film.
Yeah,
Do I appreciate him as an artist? Yes. Do I
Yeah.
want to listen to his records again? Yes. Do I want to like read more about him as a person? Am I interested in Bob Dylan now as a cultural figure more than I was previously to seeing this film? Yeah. Am I more interested in that time period? Yeah, I guess to a degree. Sure.
Yeah.
But, do I think this movie was the best thing I've ever seen as far as biopics go? No. But it was interesting, and I think they moved it along as quickly as they could. I
Yeah.
thought the actors did a really good job. They put their heels in, and so I'm going to give it a 7. What about you?
Yeah. I mean, I can't ask you first. We got to put me first because
Because
I'm like, yeah,
then you
then
change
I
your
agree
mind.
with you. Yeah, I don't know what I thought first, but it feels like a 7. You're right. You've got, plus, I respect your opinion. I mean, I would say I would give it a 7. I think I'm a harsher judge of this than I usually am of like
Okay.
non-music films.
Right. Because you have a deeper level appreciation of Bob Dylan. I mean, I did not
Yeah,
grow up in a
but
house like loving Bob Dylan.
but
I
just
actually used to
music,
say I hated Bob Dylan. So
but just like music and players in general.
sure.
So I'm like, I'm like, that guy doesn't look like he's a natural guitar player. Not Timothee Chalamet. I just mean like, I noticed little moments where I was like, I don't know. There's little things like that where I'm like, I
Yeah.
have too much personal experience to disappear.
Maybe that was
Uh,
my issue too.
yeah,
Because I think we're both performers. We've been in a lot of bands. We've played a lot. That's bothered me more in other films. What you're talking about did not bother me
yeah.
as much in this particular
No,
film.
it didn't that much. Yeah, you're right. Other ones have bothered me more, but I just mean it's like harder for me to like relax into the
Watching it.
I think so, a little bit. I don't know. I can't stop. Like, I would blank out a few times and think about the lyrics for like a really long time. And I'd be like, wait, what just happened? And then I'd talk in the movie theater and you're like, shut up. And I was like,
No, I never
I know,
said
I know,
shut up.
you didn't. I think it was inspiring because Dylan's lyrics are great. It's harder for me to relax in a music pick. I guess that's all I have to say about that.
Yeah.
Because I'm just too, like, it's the same reason I can't watch a music documentary before bed because then I'll be up like for 5 hours writing lyrics or something like that. Or I'll
Yes.
open up my laptop and want to mix something.
Yes.
So yeah, it feels like school and informational and inspiring and things like that.
Mhm. Go see the movie. Maybe you could even watch this on a plane. I think this is a good plane movie. There's no boobs that you see.
No,
There's,
no
you have
murder.
to think about,
No
there's no
murder.
murder. You have to think about that, like, because people can see your screen when you're watching a movie and maybe there's like a little kid and then somebody's watching like some kind of almost should be a X-rated film, so some little 4-year-old's like, boobs, or 12-year-old boys like, boobs. So we have to be thinking about those things when you're watching films on planes. But, you can watch this movie on a plane and nobody's going to get offended.
That's the worst when you're like watching something and like some aggressive BDSM scene comes on and you're like, they shouldn't let this be on the plane. If this is
Yeah.
gonna happen,
Yeah, you
don't
have to be
put
sensitive. Yeah.
no, I'm just
Yeah.
kidding. But it's like I think the polite person in me doesn't want to, make that happen to other people unless they are
To be fair, sometimes you wouldn't know. You're
electively.
like you're watching a film and then it gets a certain way and you're like, wait, what? This film, I was not
Yeah,
expecting these things to happen.
yeah.
Thank you so much for tuning in. Emmy, you got any final words?
Yeah. So wherever you're listening to podcasts, please give us a 5-star rating. We are really in love with doing this job for you and we want to keep doing it. And those ratings help us get there. So if you could just take a minute or two, tell your friends, by the way, maybe everyone should just send up this pod or their favorite episode of the pod to their friend and let them know. It's really helpful and we're trying to up our listenership so that we can keep doing this forever and ever until Aaron can't stand me anymore.
But that'll never happen.
And
That'll never
please
happen.
follow us on Instagram and having fun building our right now it's a quaint little audience, but we want more of you guys there. So and also any feedback you want to give us, please go comment on YouTube where you can watch us, toss our hair and scratch our face while we do this.
This week, we also have a big announcement. We will be dropping a second episode this week. It will be the first in a 2-part series about vampire films. So we're revving up to talk about the wonderful film Nosferatu, which is out still in theaters. I'll talk about that film, but part 1, which we'll be dropping this week, I'm going to be talking about the history of vampires in film, a little bit about vampire lore, and then the following episode will be part 2 with a focus on the new Nosferatu movie. So tune in. This week, you can learn about vampires in film. Then this weekend, you can go see the Nosferatu film. And then you can listen to us on Tuesday talk about the Nosferatu film. So get on board. Excited for that. Thank you so much.
We also are announcing a quickies series. So we will be doing a quick drop, maybe 20-minute episode of musicians in movies. And that's just really fun. So we can all start understanding the context of all these stars and the movies that we're in and stories. And we gotta educate ourselves and each other and the audience on where all this shit came from. So
All right, thanks so much.
we love you.
Love you. Thanks for listening.
Bye.
Bye.